And the jury has a lot to decide as it deliberates the fate of Kyle Rittenhouse. Joining me now is attorney Jonathan LaVoy, who has been providing context for us throughout this trial. And Jonathan, obviously no way to predict how long the jury will be deliberating. But before we get into the pros and cons of what was said today in those closing arguments, the first order of business tomorrow will be to get those 18 jurors down to 12. What does that process look like? And I'm surprised, too, I'm hearing that the attorneys want those alternates to stay in the courthouse while the jury deliberates.
Well, believe it or not, it's basically like a bingo kind of situation where they just randomly select 8 names and those individuals are considered the alternates. It is not common, but it does happen where jurors are kept in the courthouse so they can be plugged back into the jury should one of the jurors have a problem. If they send them home, there could be concern that they could be watching media accounts or other types of things. So that's why they want them to stay at the courthouse.
All right, so during closing arguments today, the prosecutor talked about Rittenhouse shooting and severely injuring Gage Grosskreutz. Let's listen into that.
I guarantee you, ladies and gentlemen, the defendant had no clue what his gun was capable of. Let's not flinch away from this. It's important that we understand what that gun was capable of that night. It killed 2 people, and it did this to Mr. Grosskreutz's arm.
So Jonathan, Gage was supposed to be a star witness for the prosecution, but there were mixed results. How do you think Thomas Binger handled that in closing by showing this video?
Yeah, Mr. Grosskreutz was anything but a star witness for the state, but Mr. Binger did a pretty good job today. Finally, he came forward and put together a cohesive argument. I think he put some emotion into it. I think the picture of the injury was substantial, and it shows the power of this rifle. At the end of the day, I'm not sure, it might be a little too late for Mr. Binger, but we'll see what the jury ultimately finds.
Well, also, as we looked at how the defense closed here, in part talking about Rittenhouse shooting Joseph Rosenbaum, let's listen in on that.
Shoots until the threat is immobilized. Ladies and gentlemen, other people in this community have shot somebody 7 times, and it's been found to be okay. And my client did it 4 times in 3/4 of a second to protect his life from Mr. Rosenbaum. I'm sorry, but that's what happened.
Jonathan, the defense has not wavered on self-defense, but how does that argument work as the jury looks at each shooting, each charge, and even the lesser charges, because some of this came up in the instructions?
That's right. I think the first shooting of Mr. Rosenbaum is the key to this whole case. And I think if the jury finds that that was a privileged act on behalf of Mr. Rittenhouse, then I think everything else will follow. It's just one of those things where the jury is going to have to determine whether 4 shots to Mr. Rosenbaum was reasonable, and the shots to the other individuals, Mr. Huber and Mr. Grosskreutz, were reasonable as well. At the end of the day, I think the defense always had a very cohesive and consistent message that he was being chased, that his gun was being grabbed by others, he was being hit by objects, and he had no choice. So I think the defense did a good job, and I think that there's a very strong likelihood of an acquittal, or if not that, a hung jury.
All right, we shall learn tomorrow, perhaps. At least the jury does get it tomorrow. Jonathan LaVoy, thank you very much for joining us and giving us your expertise on this case. And by the way, you can keep an eye on the latest developments in the Rittenhouse trial 24/7. You can watch the trial on Court TV. That's over the air on channel 4.3.